Welcome everybody. My name is John. I'm a recovered alcoholic and addict. Today's share is on the sunlight of the spirit. Kind of unpacking that, and I had an experience that kind of led me to this topic earlier, and it's my experience as well about feeling the sunlight of God's spirit. There's an experience to that. There's an awakening to it. We look at the problem with addiction, and there's this compulsivity of our physical bodies, and then there's this like mental part where it's like when I stop and I say I'll never do that again, I pick it up. So if you want to know if you have some sort of addiction, if you have negative consequences in your life, if you're suffering negatively finally, then and you want to put it down but you can't, well, maybe that's what we're talking about. Maybe it does have a physical component of like a physical draw of needing more of it, and then maybe you go a couple weeks without it, and then all of a sudden you pick it up because you convince yourself it wasn't that bad in the first place. Well, it's not hurting anybody, it's not killing me, we can transfer our addictions to different things that are a little more safer, a little less detriment to others. But the reality is, anything that you're putting into your body, or a relationship that you're going to, or anything online that gives you relief, that's really what we're talking about, the problem. And the problem is internal. The problem is this darkness internally, and we were made to be creatures of the sunlight. We were made to be in the sun, and in our hearts we have this darkness that needs medication. So you can see what the problem is, and if you've gone from the heroin to the drugs to the alcohol, and then maybe transferred into nicotine and caffeine and pornography, or certain types of relationships, it's just transferring because of the darkness on the inside, because we were designed to be plugged in. We were designed to have the sunlight inside of us. And so I don't know if you have this experience, but what we're talking about is this spiritual uneasiness on the inside. So when we deal with that, all of the other addictions are pushed out. Anything that we're seeking a sense of ease and comfort from, then they're like, we see the fragility of them, we see the fraudness of them, and they're not desirable anymore, because we actually have what we're really looking for. And so that's the spiritual malady, the spiritual unrest that we're born into. We're born into the spirit of fear into this world. And have you ever, and some people say like, oh, I'm blocked off from God, or God's blocked off from me, he's so distant, he doesn't hear me, I don't hear him. Have you ever had a sunburn on a cloudy day? If you're like me and you look outside and you're like, man, there's no chance of the sun hit me today, it's cloudy. I've got some of my worst sunburns with that theology. I was like, man, I didn't read the sun properly. Like, what's the sun doing? Like, it's not speaking to me, it's not peeking at me, but it's always there. And I grew up in Asia, so like the sun seems to be stronger there for some odd reason. I guess equator and all that stuff. That's scientific. So you can really get hit by the sun very hard. And I remember making that mistake of like, well, you don't really need sunscreen because it's cloudy out. That is wrong. The sun is always there. Even at night, the sun is somewhere. And so the sun never leaves. The sun's never gone. But there are things in my life that I block myself from it. And so that's the whole point, is really getting these things that take up the space for the sunlight to be there. And it's all rooted in fear. It's all rooted in busyness and pride and ego and all of this stuff here. And ultimately, the sunlight is love. So when you look at a beam of sunlight, just think of God's love, real love. And that's what our hearts are designed for. So when we have all of this stuff in here, we got to get rid of it. And we see the story on page 12 of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we have this conversation between two friends. One of them is drunk, one of them is newly sober. He goes into a drunk situation with his friend Bill. and he's talking about being born again. He's bringing, the name Jesus up. He's bringing the Bible in. And he's like, you have to be born again if you want the sunlight of God's Spirit. You need to be born again. You need to come from darkness into the light. And Bill says, like, he actually says, to Christ I concede a certainty of a great man. That's the number one question that we all have to ask ourselves. Is Jesus a great man, or is he the Son of God? And I had the honor of listening to a testimony of somebody that felt very insecure about their story. And I invited them to share their story with our little group. There was only 5 of us or so. And she's like, well, no, I'm not sober enough. I'm at 63 days. And I'm like, you're the right kind of sober. Like, we're all excited to hear your story because it's not clouded in hyper spirituality. It's not all put together. Like, this is the most important story that we could hear today. And so she just got sharing her story and being born in the dark and being adopted and all that stuff. And I could relate to that. And I was adopted as well. And we're just born into the problems for the most part. We're born separate from the love of God. We're born into fear. And so she got to just explain the spiritual darkness. She got to explain the spiritual malady and why she used and all the problems that she had internally and how the outside solved her problem when she consumed and got to that point, 63 days ago where she had enough and she gave it up. And I said, so what do you do? She goes, I go to meetings. I have a sponsor. I'm trying to work these steps. And I said, what do you do for your spirituality? And she goes, well, yeah, I believe in that. And that's my solution. And right now I worship the sun. And all I could hear, I know what she was saying, but all I could hear and see in my head was SON, the Son of God. I know right now she doesn't mean that, but I was like, yeah, you're going in the right direction. Like, that's a great starting point is yes, that's creation, but there is one behind that sun, and it's the Son of God. And he spit creation out of his mouth. And right now, all you can see, the big enough thing that you can actually see and fathom in your head and your belief and your faith is the sun. But she has that longing for light in her life. And I was like, that's really cool. We got something to work with here, because that's what Bill said. It's like, start somewhere. Abby said to Bill, start somewhere. If you can't grasp the one with all power right now, because that's what the big book is pointing us to. There is one with all power, may you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. Quoting the big book. But he brought up the concept of, like, start with faith. Start with trusting somebody but yourself. And to Bill's, he said, that statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountains in whose shadows I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in the power of God than myself. Nothing more was required for me to make my beginning. And that's amazing, because he describes the problem. The problem is a spiritual malady. The problem is darkness. The problem is sneaking and hiding. That's really what the spiritual malady is all about. And that's what we need relief from, because of the guilt and the shame behind all that, because of the tension on the inside, because we have to cover it up with lies and just try to numb the pain. And so this is the description of the spiritual malady. And really what it is darkness. We're hiding. We're sneaking. We're trying to tell people that it isn't what it seems like. This is who I am. This is who I want to be anyway. But I'm not being powered by the right source, so I'm never going to live up to it. I'm never going to live up to who I really want to be or who I'm really called to be, because I'm actually in the dark, plugged into the spirit of fear, trying to numb it with all the other kinds of spirits and seek this ease and comfort that only comes from the sun. On page 66 of the big book, as we go through this process, and so that's what the 12 steps are. It's a process to get blasted by the sun. to be warmed by the sun, to come out of darkness and of hiding. And we talk about what blocks us from the sun. It's internal. It's resentments. And it says, it's plain on page 66. It's plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic, and fill in the blank for yourself, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of the spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it's fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the spirit of the light, and the insanity of alcohol returns, or the insanity that you can run your life without God. That's the real insanity. That I can and God can't or won't. That's the real insanity. And then we get into the insanity of my life being very chaotic and destructive. And it's full of resentments. And I don't feel the sunlight. I'm not plugged into the sun. And as a motorbike rider, this spring has been very frustrating because there's no sun. It's so cool. Like today, it's like 10 degrees out and it's going to rain, maybe snow. It's May. And it gets frustrating without the sun. And I'm talking about the spiritual need that we all have is being plugged into the sun. So what does the sun do? Well, Jesus said in John 8, verse 12, I am the light of the world. And that's what recovery is recovering the light that God gave us. We get to recover the Garden of Eden. We're all made to be the temple of God. We're all designed to be his holding place. That's why we have this longing for the sun. We're born into darkness looking for sun. We're born into fear looking for love. And we look at love at all the wrong places. We look to be held. We seek comfort. All of those things, only the sun can give it to us. And so that's what I look at as recovery. We're recovering the Garden of Eden, the hand-in-hand communication, the love of God in our garden, residing on the inside with the Spirit of God. It's not an external. It's an internal light that, yes, Jesus is the light of the world, but I get to live it inside of me. In Matthew 5:14, it says, let your light shine, let it be seen, let it be known. And so what does this process that I'm on do? Well, I get the light and love of God on the inside. I go through this process of action. If you've done LifeLab or the 12 steps, that's the process of cleansing the temple, of getting this garbage that's on the inside that is blocking me from the sunlight of God. It doesn't mean he's not there. It just means I can't access his light. It's like the clouds are on the inside of me and I have to get them to the temple of my heart. And I do that through the process of step 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then I go into cultivating the garden on the inside with my harms and my amends. They're like seeds, and I get to start planting them, and the sunlight is connected to that, and I have a whole new garden that is growing. And it's a beautiful thing to be a part of. It's a beautiful thing to have that happen on the inside. And I remember in 2005, I'm going into a homeless shelter rehab center. I was already at the homeless shelter. I just transitioned into the rehab center. And I said, I don't know what kind of whack job things they're going to do. I don't even care if they give me a lobotomy, electric shock therapy. I didn't know what they were going to do. I wasn't really about medication because I've been on every med my whole entire life as a young teen or as a mid-teen because of all the diagnosis of the internal problem. So I'm like pretty sure that that's not going to be the solution, but maybe they'll give me a lobotomy. I don't know what they're going to do. But as long as this stops, then I'll have relief. And I was identifying the spiritual malady, the darkness. And so the beautiful thing is God is light. God is love. So there's a transaction that's going to happen, that's going to take place. And it's obvious. It's obvious when somebody gets lit up. It's obvious to me when somebody gets lit up by the spirit of addiction. It's easy to see. I thought I was hiding it from everybody. But those that are sober and have noses and that see the patterns change and the people change that you're hanging out with, it's really easy. So it's really easy to see when somebody starts to be a agent of light, like the light is on the inside and all of the things are kind of burning off of them. And, I believe that this is important because we're designed to be his temple, and, and, and it's a holy temple. And so we get to be the priest, and that's what this program has brought us. That's what discipleship is. Disciples that make disciples. Is that what we're called to do? That's the compulsivity that we have now. When we have this light, we want everybody else to experience that. We don't want to shine our light into everybody's eyes and make the way for everybody. We want them to experience the light for themselves. And so that's the step 12 promise. I'm compelled to pass this on. Like I got something. I was in the dark. There was mold and fungus growing on on all the spaces of my face. And now I have this light. It's beautiful. I want you to experience that. Part of that is purity and holiness. And that's God's job. I get to be the priest. And that is an important calling. Because if you know anything about the biblical priests in Leviticus, they actually would wear tassels and bells on them as they went in the presence of God. Because if they weren't found blameless, pure, and holy, they would get struck down because of the holiness of God. And Jesus is saying, be holy because I am holy. Be set apart. Be the priest to the nations. Be the intermediary. Be my light and love to attract other people to me and pass on this message. And so I think it's really important that I can be holy, that I can be pure, that I can be blameless. It doesn't mean I'm perfect, but blameless is a cool little trick because maybe I'm not perfect, but I'm not hiding. And so I tell my wife, like, oh, I was in traffic and I cursed somebody. I think I gave them the finger. And I'm not, like, imagine somebody reported that to my wife or to the church or where I work. It's like, but imagine I tell on myself and I'm like, man, I got room for improvement. Like, I got so mad that guy cut me off, like, doesn't know how important I am. Like, see how silly I am? I'm a work in progress, but I have the holiness and purity of God. And I can be blameless, even in my mistakes. And so I'm reminded of the story of Ananias and Sapphira. This was the early church. And the church wasn't a space, wasn't a place, wasn't a time. It was the people surrounded by the light and love of God, filling them on the inside, powered by the Spirit of God, experiencing the fullness of the Garden of Eden here on earth. And they came together and sold all that they had, all the extra, to give to those around them. And that's what the real church is a bunch of people that care enough for the outside world that we get to be the love and light of God. It's not a Sunday sermon. It's not where you go get fed. It's not programs. It's us coming together in a huddle like a football game and going to destroy the enemy in a way. And that's clothing people, that's feeding people, that's discipling people, that's passing on the message, that's like getting engaged on the streets and the highways and the byways or the cubicle land, wherever you're working. You get to be the love and light of God wherever you are. But the holiness of God is what's going to transform my inside because I can't transform it myself. I can't work against my character defects because that's just self-effort. That's just works-based. And so the holiness of God did this to Ananias and Sapphira because they came too. They had land. They were property owners and they sold a whole bunch off. And they offered it to the feet of the apostles. That's a cool thing too because they trusted the apostles to do what was best with the finances that they had. They didn't allocate it. They didn't even get a tax return. Well, I'm pretty sure they did. Maybe they did. I don't know the history. But I don't think they did. They free-willed it. And they said that they were asked, is that everything? And they said yes. The one said yes. And that person was struck down because of the holiness of God. One, they exaggerated, and one, they withheld from God. All they had to say was, that's all that I was willing to give. I'm keeping this portion for myself. They exaggerated, they were hypocrites, and they withheld from God. And they were obliterated. One at a time because they both had opportunities to tell the truth. Isn't that the darkness? That's what we're talking about. the red corrosive thread that's shot through the fabric of our existence that sets us in trains of motions. It's not an emotion. Fear's the enemy. Love is the solution. And so they were gripped by fear. They withheld from God and were obliterated. Why is that good? Because there's parts of all of us, there's parts of me that withheld from God. Because I'm not even able to give it all because I don't know because it's in the dark. But I want the light to come in, and I want that to be obliterated on the inside of me. And so the holiness of God gets to come on the inside and start taking away these character defects, the things that separate me from the people around me, separate the things out of me that make it so that I'm not useful or helpful in the ways of the people around me. And so we want that. We call upon the holiness of God to enter into these temple for us to be cleansed. And so when people are holding on to things, I think that's a good metric for you. Are these things being obliterated from my life? Am I ceasing to see what pornography will give me, or my phone time will give me, or, like the movies or the TV shows or all of the things that I really thought was important? All of those things are just like garbage to me now. Like, it's just, I don't even like that. I will promise you that the holiness, the spirit of the sunlight of God's love is within you. And those things are starting to get farther and farther away from you. And maybe one day you're going to look at the Diet Coke that you're drinking, and you're already making good decisions. And you're like, man, I don't want this in my life anymore. And you're like, you're pursuing God at such a level, but you're still surrounded by the streets and the people that are sticking needles in their arm and the people that are hungry. And you're doing inventories with people day after day, and you're involved in the things of God, and you're doing His will, because you have the light of God within you. So we go from being agents of fear, being driven at all corners of our heart in the darkness. And if you've been somebody that's afraid of the darkness, that's the description of the spiritual malady within us. I need a nightlight. I need a teddy bear. I need my blanket. I need you to tuck me in. I need a story. Because we're all children of God, but we forget that we're children. And we try to live this life without God and have the responsibilities of a life without God. But if God's the Father and we're the children, this process that we're under is going to lead us into a way that we get to be the children. And life is going to be fun and fulfilling and meaningful and purposeful. And money's going to take on a whole new outlook in your life, and giving is, and relationships are, and what's important to you totally will change. And that's only derived by the Spirit of God. So I really encourage you to stop withholding, stop exaggerating, stop putting on fronts of who you want everybody to see, but invite the Spirit of the sunlight inside of you. Have this relationship with God, but understand the clouds are in the way. And so there is a process. There is a reason that's there, because of consent. At the core of love, and at the core of the spiritual life, I believe that there has to be consent. God can't just push it all away. You actually have consented to the evil one. You've consented to fear in your life through the experiences of your whole entire life, of your childhood, of your parents, of your growing up, of the abuse that you suffered. All of those things cause wounding, and messages and messages that you've agreed with, and then vows that you've taken. But there's relief. It doesn't come from a relationship with others. It doesn't come from owning a certain car. It doesn't come from having a certain job. It doesn't come from a bottle or a needle or a pill bottle or hobbies. Like, those things are good at needles are not, but unless you're diabetic, then I think it's okay. But all of those things that give me real ease and comfort is the discipline and instruction and the voice of a father. And I get to be the kid. And he gets all of the responsibility. So would you be led by the Spirit of God today? Would you invite the Spirit of God's sunlight to start peeking through the cracks? And if you think that you're cloudy on the inside, well, then we definitely have a process. We have the steps. We have, LifeLab is a process of the steps. So if that's something that you don't want to miss out on. So hit me up if you want some help with that and direction, that kind of stuff. Be involved in the fellowship of the Spirit.